Hey everyone, we're back with our chapter book read-along of Holes by Louis Sachar. We are on chapters 11 through 15 today. So let's see what you guys remember. If you are watching this with somebody, pause the video and go over some things that has happened so far in our story. Or maybe some of your favorite things that you have remembered. If you're done with that or are watching this by yourself, that's okay, because here goes my review. Holes is about a boy named Stanley Yelnats. He got in trouble for something that he didn't even do. He was in the wrong place at the wrong time, and everyone thinks he stole some shoes that were from a famous baseball player named Sweet Feet. They were being donated to a homeless shelter, and everyone, once again, didn't believe Stanley when he said that they fell from the sky. Stanley was given the option, go to jail or go to Camp Green Lake. Camp Green Lake is for boys who get in trouble. At Camp Green Lake, it is neither green nor is there a lake. And they are asked to at Camp Green Lake, the boys have to dig a hole every single day. This is supposed to build character and make them better. We've learned a few things about Stanley's family. We learned that there was a man, Stanley's great-great-grandfather, who came to America, but he is cursed by Madame Zeroni, who he broke a promise with. And so now he's the good-for-nothing, no good, dirty, rotten, pig-stealing great-great-grandfather. And Stanley and all of his other grandfathers were cursed. They just have rotten bad luck that they blame on this curse. Stanley also had a great-grandfather, who was held up by Kissin' Kate Barlow, who is a outlaw who lived in Texas. And we are going to see what comes next in Holes. Last thing, the boys all go by nicknames. Stanley just got his, Caveman. Let's get started with chapters 11 through 15. Chapter 11. Stanley returned to his hole. It wasn't fair. Mr. Pendanski had even said his fossil was interesting. He slammed his shovel into the ground and pried up another piece of earth. After a while, he noticed X-Ray had come by and was watching him dig. "Hey, Caveman, let me talk to you a second," X-Ray said. Stanley put down his shovel and stepped up out of his hole. "Say, listen," said X-Ray. "If you find something else, give it to me, okay?" Stanley wasn't sure what to say. X-Ray was clearly the leader of the group, and Stanley didn't want to get on his bad side. "You're new here, right?" said X-Ray. "I've been here for almost a year. I've never found anything. You know, my eyesight's not so good. No one knows this, but you know why my name's X-Ray?" Stanley shrugged. "It's Pig Latin for Rex. That's all. I'm too blind to find anything." Stanley tried to remember how Pig Latin worked. "I mean," X-Ray went on, "why should you get a day off when you've only been here a couple of days? If anybody gets a day off, it should be me. It's only fair, right?" I guess, Stanley agreed. X-Ray smiled. "You're a good guy, Caveman." Stanley picked up his shovel. The more he thought about it, the more he was glad that he agreed to let X-Ray have anything he might find. If he was going to survive at Camp Green Lake, it was far more important that X-Ray think he was a good guy than it was for him to get one day off. Besides, he didn't expect to find anything anyway. There probably wasn't anything of interest. out here. And even if there was, he'd never been what you could call lucky. He slammed his blade into the ground, and then dumped out another shovelful of dirt. It was a little surprising, he thought, that X-Ray was the leader of the group, since he obviously wasn't the biggest, or the toughest. In fact, except for Zero, X-Ray was the smallest. Armpit was the biggest. Zigzag may have even been taller than Armpit, but that was only because of his neck. Yet Armpit and all the others seemed to be willing to do whatever X-Ray asked of them. Stanley dug up another shovel full of dirt. It occurred to him that Armpit wasn't the biggest. He, Caveman, was bigger. He was glad they called him Caveman. It meant they accepted him as a member of the group. He would have been glad if they'd even called him Barf Bag. It was really quite remarkable to him. At school, bullies like Derek Doone used to pick on him. Yet Derek Doone would be scared senseless by any of the boys here. As he dug his hole, Stanley thought about what it would be like if Derek Doone had to fight Armpit or Squid. Derek wouldn't have stand a chance. He imagined what it would be like if he became good friends with all of them, and then for some reason they all went back with him to school. Then Derek Doone tried to steal his notebook. "Just what do you think you're doing?" asked Squid, as he slams his hands into Derek's smug face. "Caveman's our friend," said Armpit, grabbing him by the shirt collar. Stanley played the scene over and over again in his mind, each time watching another boy from Group D beat up Derek Doone. It helped him dig his hole and ease his own suffering. Whatever pain he felt was being felt 10 times worse by Derek. Chapter 12. Again, Stanley was the last one to finish digging. It was late afternoon when he dragged himself back to the compound. This time he would have accepted that ride on the truck if it was offered. When he got to the tent, he found Mr. Pendanski and the other boys sitting in a circle on the ground. "Welcome, Stanley," said Mr. Pendanski. "Hey, Caveman, you get your hole dug?" asked Magnet. He managed to nod. "Spitting it?" asked Squid. He nodded again. "You're right," he said to X-Ray. "The second hole's the hardest." X-Ray shook his head. "The third hole's the hardest," he said. "Come join our circle," said Mr. Pendanski. Stanley plopped down between Squid and Magnet. He needed to rest up before taking a shower. "We've been discussing what we want to do with our lives," said Mr. Pendanski. "We're not going to be at Camp Green Lake forever. We need to prepare for the day that we leave here and join the rest of society." "Hey, that's great, Mom," said Magnet. "They're going to finally let you out of here?" The other boys laughed. "Okay, Jose," said Mr. Pendanski. "What do you want to do with your life?" "I don't know," said Magnet. "You need to think about that," said Mr. Pendanski. "It's important to have goals. Otherwise, you're going to end up right back in jail. What do you like to do?" "I don't know," said Magnet. "You must like something," said Mr. Pendanski. "I like animals," said Magnet. "Good," said Mr. Pendanski. "Does anyone know of any jobs that involve animals?" "Veterinarian," said Armpit. "That's right," said Mr. Pendanski. "He could work at a zoo," said Zigzag. "He belongs in a zoo," said Squid. Then he and X-Ray laughed. "What about you, Stanley? Any ideas for Jose?" Stanley sighed. "Animal trainer?" he said. "Like for the circus or movies or something like that." "Any of those jobs sound good to you, Jose?" asked Mr. Pendanski. "Yeah, I like what Caveman said about training animals for movies. I think it'd be fun to train monkeys." X-Ray laughed. "Don't laugh, Rex," said Mr. Pendanski. "We don't laugh at people's dreams. Someone is going to have to train monkeys for the movies." "Who are you kidding, Mom?" asked X-Ray. "Magnet's never going to be a monkey trainer." "You don't know that," said Mr. Pendanski. "I'm not saying it's going to be easy. Nothing in life is easy. But that's no reason to give up. You'll be surprised what you can accomplish if you set your mind to it. After all, you only have one life, so you should try to make the most of it." Stanley tried to figure out what he'd say if Mr. Pendanski asked him what he wanted to do with his life. He used to think he wanted to work for the FBI, but this doesn't seem appropriate place to mention that. "So far, you've all done a pretty good job at messing up your lives," said Mr. Pendanski. "I know you think you're cool." He looked at Stanley. "You're a caveman now, huh? You like digging holes, caveman?" Stanley didn't know what to say. "Well, let me tell you something, caveman. You are here on account of one person. If it wasn't for that person, you wouldn't be digging holes out in the hot sun. You know who that person is? My no-good, dirty, rotten, pig-stealing great-great-grandfather?" The other boys howled with laughter. Even Zero smiled. It was the first time Stanley had ever seen Zero smile. He usually had such an angry expression on his face. Now he had a huge smile. It almost seemed too big for his face, like the smile of a jack-o'-lantern. "No," said Mr. Pendanski. "That person is you, Stanley. You are the reason you're here. You're responsible for yourself. You messed up your life, and it's up to you to fix it. No one else is going to do it for you." Mr. Pendanski looked from one boy to another. "You're all special in your own way," he said. "You've all got something to offer. You have to think about what you want to do, then do it. Even you, Zero. You're not completely worthless." The smile was now gone from Zero's face. "What do you want to do with your life?" Mr. Pendanski asked him. Zero's mouth was shut tight. As he glared at Mr. Pendanski, his dark eyes seemed to expand. "What about it, Zero?" said Mr. Pendanski. "What do you like to do?" "I like to dig holes," he said. Chapter 13. All too soon, Stanley was back out on the lake, sticking his shovel into the dirt. X-Ray was right. The third hole was the hardest. So was the fourth hole, and the fifth, and the sixth, and He dug his shovel into the dirt. After a while, he lost track of the day of the week, and how many holes he dug. It all seemed like one big hole, and it would take a year and a half to dig it. He guessed he'd lost at least 5 pounds. He figured that in a year and a half, he'd be either in great physical condition or else dead. He dug his shovel into the dirt. It couldn't always be this hot, he thought. Surely it got cooler in December. Maybe then they froze. He dug his shovel into the dirt. His skin had gotten tougher. It didn't hurt so much to hold the shovel. And as he drank from his canteen, he looked up at the sky. A cloud had appeared earlier in the day. It was the first cloud he could remember seeing since coming to Camp Green Lake. He and the other boys had been watching it all day, hoping it would move in front of the sun. Occasionally, it got close, like it was just teasing them. His hole was waist deep. He dug his shovel into the dirt. As he dumped it out, he thought he saw something glisten as it fell into the dirt pile. Whatever it was quickly buried. Stanley stared at the pile a moment, unsure if he'd even seen it. Even if it was something, what good would it do him? He promised to give anything he'd found to X-Ray. It didn't seem worth the effort to climb out of his hole to check it out. He glanced up at the cloud, which was close enough to the sun that he had to squint to look at it. He dug his shovel back into the earth, scooped out some dirt, and lifted it over his dirt pile. But instead of dumping it there, he tossed it off to the side. His curiosity had gotten the better of him. He climbed up out of his hole, sifted his fingers through the pile, and he felt something hard and metallic. He pulled it out. It was a gold tube, about as long and as wide as his second finger on his right hand. The tube was open at one end and closed at the other. He used a few drops of his precious water to clean it. There seemed to be some kind of design on the flat, closed end. He poured a few more drops of water onto it and rubbed it with the inside of his pants pocket. He looked again at the design engraved into the flat bottom of the tube. He could see the outline of a heart with the letters K-B etched inside of it. He tried to figure out some way that he wouldn't have to give it to X-Ray. He could just keep it, but that wouldn't do him any good either. He wanted a day off. He looked at large piles of dirt near where X-Ray was digging. X-Ray was probably almost finished for the day. Getting the rest of the day off would hardly do him much good. X-Ray would first have to show the tube to Mr. Sir or Mr. Pendanski, who would have to then show it to the warden. By then, X-Ray might have been done anyway. Stanley wondered about trying to secretly take the tube directly to the warden. He could explain the situation to the warden, and the warden might make up an excuse for giving him the day off, so X-Ray wouldn't suspect. He looked across the lake toward the cabin under the 2 oak trees. The place scared him. He had been at Camp Green Lake for almost 2 weeks, and still hadn't seen the warden. That was just as well. If he could go the entire year and a half without seeing the warden, that would be fine with him. Besides, he didn't know if the warden would find this tube interesting. He looked at it again. It looked familiar. He thought he'd seen something like it somewhere before. He couldn't place it. "What you got there, caveman?" asked Zigzag. Stanley's large hand closed around the tube. "Nothing, just It was useless. "I thought I might have found something." "Another fossil?" "No, I'm not sure what it is." "Let me see," said Zigzag. Instead of showing it to Zigzag, Stanley brought it to X-Ray. Zigzag followed. X-Ray looked at the tube, then rubbed his dirty glasses on his dirty shirt and looked at the tube again. One by one, the other boys dropped their shovels and came to look. "Looks like an old shotgun shell," said Squid. "That's probably what it is," said Stanley. He decided not to mention the engraved design. Maybe no one would notice it. He doubted X-Ray could even see it. "No, it's too thin and long to be a shotgun shell," said Magnet. "It's probably just a piece of junk," said Stanley. "Well, I'll show it to Mom," said X-Ray. "See what he thinks. Who knows? Maybe I'll get the day off." "Your hole's almost finished," said Stanley. "Yeah, so?" said X-Ray. Stanley raised and lowered his shoulder. "So why don't you wait until tomorrow to show it to Mom?" he suggested. "You can pretend you found it first thing in the morning. Then you can get the whole day off instead of just an hour or so this afternoon." X-Ray smiled. "Good thinking, caveman." He dropped the tube into his large pocket on the right leg of his dirty orange pants. Stanley returned to his hole. When the water truck came, Stanley started to take his place at the end of the line, but X-Ray told him to get behind Magnet, in front of Zero. Stanley moved up 1 place in line. Chapter 14. That night, as Stanley lay on his scratchy and smelly cot, he tried to figure out what he could have done differently, but there was nothing he could do. For once in his unlucky life, he was in the right place at the right time, and it still didn't help him. "You still got it?" he asked X-Ray the next morning at breakfast. X-Ray looked at him with half-open eyes behind his dirty glasses. "I don't know what you're talking about," he grumbled. "You know," said Stanley. "No, I don't know," X-Ray snapped. "So just leave me alone, okay? I don't want to talk to you." Stanley didn't say another word. Mr. Sir marched the boys out onto the lake, chewing sunflower seeds along the way and spitting out the shells. He scraped the ground with his boot heel to mark where each boy was supposed to dig. Stanley stamped down on the back of the blade of his shovel, piercing the hard, dry earth. He couldn't figure out why X-Ray had snapped at him. If he wasn't going to produce the tube, why did he make Stanley give it to him? Was he just going to keep it? The tube was gold in color, but Stanley didn't think it was real gold. The water truck came a little after sunrise. Stanley finished his last drop of water and stepped up out of his hole. At this time of day, Stanley sometimes could see some distant hills or mountains on the other side of the lake. They were only visible for a short while and would soon disappear behind the haze of heat and dirt. The truck stopped and the dust cloud drifted past it. X-Ray took his place at the front of the line. Mr. Pendanski filled his canteen. Thanks, Mom," X-Ray said. He didn't mention the tube. Mr. Pendanski filled all the canteens, then climbed back into the cab of the pickup. He still had to bring water to Group E. Stanley could see them digging about 200 yards away. Mr. Pendanski!" X-Ray shouted from his hole. "Wait, Mr. Pendanski, I think I might have found something." The boys all followed Mr. Pendanski as he walked over to X-Ray's hole. Stanley could see the gold tube sticking out of some dirt on the end of X-Ray's shovel. Mr. Pendanski examined it and took a long look at the flat bottom. "I think the warden's going to like this." "Does X-Ray get the day off?" asked Squid. "Just keep digging until someone comes and tells you otherwise," Mr. Pendanski said. Then he smiled. "But if I were you, Rex, I wouldn't dig too hard." Stanley watched the cloud of dust move across the lake to the cabin beneath the trees. The boys in Group E were just going to have to wait. It didn't take long for the pickup to return. Mr. Pendanski stepped out of the cab. A tall woman with red hair stepped out of the passenger side. She looked even taller than she was, since Stanley was down in his hole. She wore a black cowboy hat and black cowboy boots, which were studded with turquoise stones. The sleeves on her shirt were rolled up, and her arms were covered with freckles, as was her face. She walked right up to X-Ray. "This where you found it?" "Yes, ma'am." "Your good work will be rewarded." She turned to Mr. Pendanski. "Drive X-Ray back to camp. Let him take a double shower and give him some clean clothes. But first, I want you to fill everyone's canteen." "I just filled them all a little while ago," said Mr. Pendanski. The Warrens stared hard at him. "Excuse me?" she said. Her voice was soft. "I had just filled them when Rex—" "Excuse me?" the warden said again. "Did I ask you when you last filled them?" "No, but I just—" "Excuse me." Mr. Pendanski stopped talking. The warden wiggled her finger for him to come to her. "It's hot, and it's only going to get hotter," she said. "Now, these fine boys have been working hard. Don't you think it might be possible that they've taken a drink since you last filled their canteens?" Mr. Pendanski said nothing. The warden turned to Stanley. "Caveman, will you come here, please?" Stanley was surprised she knew his name. He had never even seen her. Until she stepped out of that truck, he didn't even know the warden was a woman. He nervously went toward her. "Mr. Pendanski and I have been having a discussion. Have you taken a drink since Mr. Pendanski last filled your canteen?" Stanley didn't want to cause any trouble for Mr. Pendanski. "I still got plenty left," he said. "Excuse me?" He stopped. "Yeah, I drank some." "Thank you. May I see your canteen, please?" Stanley handed it to her. Her fingernails were painted dark red. She gently shook the canteen, letting the water swish inside the plastic container. "Do you hear the empty spaces?" "Yes," said Mr. Pendanski. "Then fill it," she said. "And the next time I tell you to do something, I expect you to do it without questioning my authority. If it's too much trouble for you to fill a canteen, I'll give you a shovel. You can dig the hole, and the caveman can fill your canteen." She turned back to Stanley. "I don't think that would be too much trouble for you, would it?" "No," said Stanley. "So what will it be?" she asked Mr. Pendanski. "Do you want to fill canteens, or do you want to dig?" "I'll fill the canteens," said Mr. Pendanski. "Thank you," said the warden. Chapter 15. Mr. Pendanski filled the canteens. The warden got a pitchfork out of the back of the pickup. She poked it through X-Ray's dirt pile to see if anything else might have been buried in there as well. "After you drop off X-Ray, I want you to bring back 3 wheelbarrows," she said. X-Ray got into the pickup. As the truck pulled away, he leaned out the wide window and waved. "Zero," said the warden. "I want you to take over X-Ray's hole." She seemed to know that Zero was the fastest digger. "Armpit and Squid, you'll keep digging where you have been," she said. "But you're each going to have a helper. Zigzag, you help Armpit. Magnet will help Squid. And Caveman, you'll work with Zero. We're going to dig the dirt twice. Zero will dig it out of the hole, and Caveman will carefully shovel it into the wheelbarrow." Zigzag will do the same for Armpit, and the same with Magnet and Squid. We don't want to miss anything. If either of you find something, you'll both get the rest of the day off and a double shower. When your wheelbarrows are full, you are to dump them away from this area. I don't want any dirt piles to get in the way. The warden remained at the site for the remainder of the day, along with Mr. Pendanski and Mr. Sir, who showed up after a while. Occasionally, Mr. Sir would leave to take water to other groups of campers, but otherwise, he and the water truck stayed parked there. The warden saw to it that nobody in Group D was ever thirsty. Stanley did as he was told. He carefully looked through all the dirt dug up by Zero, as he shoveled it into a wheelbarrow, though he knew he wouldn't find anything. It was easier than digging his own hole. When the wheelbarrow was full, he took it a good distance away before dumping it. The warden couldn't keep still. She kept walking around, looking over other boys' shoulders, and sticking her pitchfork through the dirt piles. "You're doing fine, just fine," she told Stanley. After a while, she told the boys to switch places, so that Stanley, Zigzag, and Magnet dug in the holes, and Zero, Armpit, and Squid shoveled the excavated dirt in the wheelbarrows. After lunch, Zero took over digging again, and Stanley returned to the wheelbarrow. "There's no hurry," the warden said several times. "The main thing is to not miss anything." The boys dug until each hole was well over 6 feet deep and wide. Still, it was easier for 2 boys to dig a 6-foot hole than for 1 boy to dig a 5-foot hole. "All right, that's enough for today," the warden said. "I've waited this long. I can wait another day." Mr. Sir drove her back to her cabin. "I wonder how she knew all our names," Stanley said as he walked back to the compound. "She watches us all the time," said Zigzag. "She's got hidden microphones and cameras all over the place. In the tents, the rec room, the shower." "The shower?" said Stanley. He wondered if Zigzag was just being paranoid. "The cameras are tiny," said Armpit. "No bigger than a toenail on your little toe." Stanley had his doubts about that. He didn't think they could make cameras that small. Microphones, maybe. He realized that was why X-Ray didn't want to talk to him about the gold tube at breakfast. X-Ray was afraid the warden might be listening. One thing was certain, they weren't just digging to build character. They were definitely looking for something. And whatever they were looking for, they were looking in the wrong place. Stanley gazed out across the lake, toward the spot where he had been digging yesterday when he found the gold tube. He dug the hole into his memory. And that's where we're going to end for today. All right, that's where we ended for today, but let's get to our discussion questions for chapters 11 through 15. What did X-Ray ask Stanley to do the next time he found something? He wanted Stanley to give it to X-Ray, to give it to him, because Stanley has only been there a little bit of time, and X-Ray's already been there for a year and hasn't found anything. So, he thought he deserved a day off more than Stanley. Why was Stanley surprised that X-Ray was the leader of the group? I think it is because he's not really the biggest. You usually think of the biggest, toughest guy to be like the leader of a group of somebody like that, right? But he just has been there the longest, and Armpit and Caveman are both bigger than him. Zigzag too, but height. What was Mr. Pendanski doing when Stanley finally dragged himself back to the compound? He was having a talk with all the boys, right? They sat down in a circle, and they were supposed to talk about their futures. Who did Stanley say was the reason he was there at Camp Green Lake? His no good, good for nothing, pig-stealing great-great-grandfather. Dirty, rotten, pig-stealing great-great-grandfather. Why was Stanley reluctant at first to retrieve the glistening object from his pile of dirt? He didn't really want to give it to X-Ray, did he? He wanted his day off too. I can understand that. What were the letters on the bottom of the tube? So Stanley cleaned it off and he found 2 letters. K and B in a heart. What advice did Stanley offer X-Ray about showing the tube to the warden? He said maybe wait another day. Your hole is almost done. Why waste a whole day off when you only have barely an hour left done digging? You can get a whole day right in the morning. That'd be nice. Last question. What is the significance of X-Ray waiting? So why is it important that X-Ray waited to show the gold tube and they're digging in this different spot? As Stanley points out, the warden is clearly looking for something, and they are looking in the wrong place. All right, we'll see next time what happens, and maybe if they know where to look later in our next video, Reading Holes. I hope you enjoyed. We'll see you next time. Bye.